Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the South Carolina State Library's South Carolina Center for the Books Speaker at the Center series. We are joined tonight with Mary Martha Greene, the Cheese Biscuit Queen, and the author of her newest release, Kiss My Aspic. So we are very excited tonight to have her here with us as part of our Speaker at this Center series. The Center for the Book is a Library of Congress program where each state and territory in the United States has a designated place, whether it's at a state library or if it's held in a humanities center, that celebrates the literary and cultural heritage of our state. And certainly, Miss Mary Martha Greene embodies the cultural heritage and literary heritage of our state. So I do have in the talk, in the chat, the first link is Kiss My Aspic. That will take you directly to her website. I do want to let you know that this event is being recorded this evening, and I do have the transcript turned on. And down below, we just see our beautiful logo and flyer, as well as the cover of the book. So without further ado, I will mute everyone but Mary, and we'll get started. If you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat for now. And then at the end, if we have time, we can take those questions as well as some with people unmuted. And just please do mute yourself when not speaking. Thank you so much, and welcome, Mary Martha Greene.
Thanks, McCabe. I appreciate it. And I split time between Beaufort and Columbia, but I'm coming to you tonight from Pat Conroy territory down in Beaufort, South Carolina. And I want to apologize to everybody that's tuned in. Number one, my throat sounds like a frog. Of course, today it kicked up. So I do have a little bit of tea with some lemon and honey in it to get me through tonight. And if I start croaking too much, I might have to take a little sip. And I also had a little PowerPoint presentation, but I am so technologically inept that we couldn't get it to work. So y'all just have to look at me and look at this is my grandmother's kitchen in her house in Beaufort. There's some cheese biscuits over my shoulder back there that were baked fresh today. I wish y'all could smell them because they really smell good. And so we'll just spend a little time telling some stories, and I'll tell you about the book. Pat Conroy said the most beautiful words in the English language were "tell me a story," and I believe that, and I would be remiss if I didn't invite everyone down to come down to Beaufort and visit the Pat Conroy Center. They have a great program there. They've got a lot of memorabilia about Pat. They have great programming. You can even get a tour in Beaufort. My friend Jenna McCauley will take you on a great tour and show you all the Pat related sites. So come on down to Beaufort when you get a chance and visit Pat Conroy territory. I am delighted to be with y'all. As I said, if Pat said the most beautiful words in the English language were "tell me a story," this is my grandmother's house I'm sitting in. It's my grandmother's kitchen. And probably to my grandmother, the most beautiful words in the English language were "let's make up a story." My grandmother taught school for 40 years and she retired in May, and I was born in December. So I was kind of her retirement project. And when my brother and I were little, excuse me, when my brother and I were little, if my mother didn't want to drag the whole entourage of my brother and me and my grandmother into the store, we'd end up sitting in the car, and my grandmother, to keep us amused and keep the whining about when his mom coming back, or he's touching me, or don't look at me, to a minimum, she would get us to make up stories with her. And when my brother and I were little, if my parents didn't have a social engagement on Friday night, my brother and I and my mother would usually get in the kitchen and make a pound cake or something. So in our little minds, a pound cake or a cake was, or some dessert was always getting ready to just break out somewhere. Excuse me. So in our little minds, whoever was going in the store was getting the ingredients to bake a cake. So we would make up a cake. Well, what's the cake occasion for the cake? Well, it's a birthday party. Well, whose birthday party is it? And we'd be off on a big tangent about some birthday party that may or may not ever be happening, or for some person that may or may not ever exist. But it anchored in me a real lifelong love of stories and storytelling. And my grandmother was so good at making those little details that would just keep you hanging on every one of her words. So I think that's really where my love of storytelling and writing came from, and also of cooking and recipes. The stories are very much a combination. I've got both my books here. This is the first one, The Cheese Biscuit Queen Tells All, and I'll tell you in a minute how that one came about. And then this is the one that just came out last month, The Cheese Biscuit Queen Kiss My Aspic. And very important to put those last three letters on there. Um, but the combination of food and recipes and stories, I think, is so it's important to any family, but I think here in the South, we particularly think it's important, and we're particularly fond of combining the two. As I mentioned, in the first book was called The Cheese Biscuit Queen Tells All. It came out in May of 2021. And the way it came about, one of my goddaughters, we are diehard Gamecock fans, born and reared. We had reared her to be a Gamecock fan. She upped and went to that school in the upper part of the state that has a lot of orange to it. And her junior year, she was getting ready to go off on her semester at sea. She was actually sailing two-thirds of the way around the world. And she was sitting at my kitchen in Columbia. And right before she left, she said, "Aunt May, when I get back, I want to learn to cook." And so we had a friend in Columbia that had a French cooking school at the time. And so I calculated in my head how many of Francois' classes I thought I could afford to send her to. And she said, "No, I want you to teach me how to cook." So after I, got a little choked up, I said, "Well, while you're gone, I'll start trying to figure out some recipes and so forth." And so I did, and she'd been gone a while, and I had really not done a whole lot about trying to put the recipes together. And this is not a child that you make a promise to that you have no intention of keeping. So after she'd been gone a little bit, I realized I hadn't done much about it. So I started trying to find the recipe box that when I redid this kitchen that I'm in now, I thought I had put all my family's recipes in a down here in the Low Country. We have Dempsey's tomatoes, and Dempsey's tomato boxes make just the best filing boxes in the world. So I thought I'd put them all in a Dempsey's tomato box and put them in the closet in my grandmother's bedroom. And I went to find them, and all I could find were old tax receipts. And I knew that I had taken a bunch of tax receipts to the accountant to be shredded. So I was really afraid that I had taken the all of the recipes, family recipes, and so forth they were now shredded at the accountant, and we'd never see them again. So I did what every good Southern girl was going to do, and that where I told you that pound cake was always just about to break out when my brother and I were children. Uh, we I went in the closet underneath the stairs, which I made into a pantry, and was trying to find all the ingredients to make a pound cake. I was going to make a pound cake just because I was frustrated. So I was looking in there, and I looked all the way, how the stairs go on down like that, and all the way at the smallest end underneath the stairs, I saw the red top to my mother's recipe box. So those recipes were in there, and I started pulling them out. And I was sitting at the breakfast counter looking, and you know how you go through and you sort of taste like, "Ooh, I remember this one," or "Ooh, I didn't like that. No, I'm not putting that one in the cookbook." And so I went through those, and about the time I started really sorting through them in earnest, getting the recipes together, the phone dinged, and it was my goddaughter, and she was in Greece, and she said, "Happy Mother's Day, Aunt May, I love you." And I just kind of felt like because she had those recipes had been returned to me on Mother's Day, that was kind of my uh, permission, if you will, from my mother and aunts that I could uh, do something with them and have fun and make the recipes out of them. So I started really writing recipes for her, and I have a younger generation of cousins. And I'm gonna take another little sip of tea because my voice is bothering me. I hope it's not as bothering y'all as much as it is me. It's pollen down here. I think it's a week or two ahead of what it is in Columbia. So I started going through and sorting the recipes, and as I wrote the recipes, the stories just sort of started to come out along with them, and I was really going to write it for my godchildren and my cousins and their younger children and take it to Kinko's and get several copies made of it and give it to everybody. And other people started saying, well, they wanted a copy of it. They wanted a copy of it. And then a friend of mine who was an author with USC Press, I said, well, she was going to meet with them. And I said, well, just, tell them, a really good cookbook, just kind of being a smart aleck. And they said, well, no, we'd like to see it. So they showed interest in publishing it, and in May of 2021 that book was published. And what we found with that book was that the folks like the stories as much as the recipes, and I think that's a real Southern thing, is kind of telling stories around the dinner table and that community around the dinner table. So both the cookbooks kind of grew from that. I'm very honored to kind of be the caregiver of my grandmother's house. I don't consider that I'm the owner. I'm just the current recipient of it, and the person that's the caretaker of it right now, and I'll pass it along to another generation. Um, but another thing I love about stories and the recipes that go along with them is that it keeps those memories alive of those folks. My younger set of cousins, the next generation down from me, they're the last group that remembers my grandmother being in this house and my aunts and my mother being in this house. And the generation down from them, only the oldest ever got to come down here when they were alive. Excuse me. And he says he sort of remembers it. I think he remembers more stories we've told about him than about what he did when he was down here than him actually remembering the actual trip down here. But his younger brother, who never got to come down here when he's alive, when they were alive, he loves coming down here. He's now a freshman at Winthrop University, and he told me last time he was down here before he went off to college. He says, Aunt Mamie, I love coming down here. He loves eating the food, number one, but he also loves hearing the stories. And he says, I feel like I know them because you tell the stories, and he loves hearing about them. So, but they're good kids, and I'm very proud of them. But I love the fact that they love hearing about the stories. So if y'all don't mind, I might tell y'all a couple stories that are in the book. My dad was the family court judge down here in Beaufort, and my dad was in the 82nd Airborne during the World War II, and then he came home and practiced law, and he, had his judge's robe. So he always kind of had uniforms that he wore. He was in the Army. The Southern lawyer kind of wore a dark suit and a white shirt and a little skinny maroon tie. Obviously, when he was on the bench, he had a judge's robe. And then the 1970s hit. And, men's clothes got a little bit flashier. And my dad could not always necessarily match things up quite right. So, do you remember Garanimals for little children that came out about that time? And like you wore all the elephants together, and you could wear all the giraffes together, but you didn't wear an elephant with a hippopotamus because they wouldn't match. So I always thought it would be a really good idea to have like Garanimals for grown men. So, with things they'd understand, like you wore all the ducks together. If you wanted to be real conservative, you just wore mallard ducks together. If you wanted to be a little flashier, you could wear a mallard duck with a wood duck, but you wouldn't wear a mallard duck with a white-tailed deer or anything. So I thought Garanimals for grown men might be a little market niche that we needed. And we used to have. I've spent my entire career at the State House as a government relations professional, which ASO means being a lobbyist. And we used to have a state senator who was colorblind, and his wife would lay out the clothes for him in the morning. And when she got a little mad at him, she'd dress him funny. And some days we'd be like, oh, I don't know what he did, but it must have been really bad because that in no way, shape, or form matches. But Garanimals for grown men could have been really helpful for somebody like that. So that's kind of one of the stories in the book. And another friend of mine's mother, and I was talking to this friend today, and she said, "Oh, I can just hear my mother going, I wish I would have been known for more things than my Jello salad 50 years ago." But a friend of mine was one of four girls, all very, very accomplished. And her father was just a sweetheart and loved being the dad of a girl dad, what we now call a girl dad. But one year at Christmas, her mother, made that Jello salad that everybody's mama used to make. And usually she'd make it these little domed Jello molds, but this year those pointed kind of, remember the pointed kind of insert coffee inserts that you had the little plastic thing and the little coffee insert went in there. Well, she decided those little plastic inserts would look like Christmas trees. So she made the Jello salad with the Christmas trees to look like Christmas trees. Well, she unmolded them and they were kind of small. So she kind of put two of the little molded salads together. And then she put a little dollop of whipped cream on top. And then she put a little cherry on top. And then she put them on a big silver tray. And she comes sweeping into the dining room. And her husband and daughters did not think they looked like little Christmas trees. They thought they looked like little other parts of a woman's anatomy because they were jiggling all over that tray. And they all fell into hysterical laughter. Her mother did not think it was funny at all and told them they were being vulgar, but we still remember that salad all these years later. And Carolyn's, or whoops, I wasn't going to tell who it was, but my friends' grandchildren will know that, who never got to know their grandmother will know that story now about her Jello mold. So um, I, uh, I talked about my grandmother and one of my friends' mothers that I was very close to. Her grandson, favorite grandson, I should say, maybe not favorite, but namesake of her husband and son. My one of my godchildren had was graduating from high school, and they'd had a big party, and her mom had to go to do this and go to the um, graduation that morning and lunch afterwards, and then they were having a party afterwards. And Miss Flora had really hung in there all day and really done well. And after a while, she went and sat down in the den and she fell asleep. And Miss Flora was a big teetotaler from South Georgia, and so she fell asleep, and her favorite grandson, who was a little bit of a prankster, went and took the bottle of an almost empty bottle of tequila off of the bar and nestled it in Miss Flora's arm right there, and it looked like she drunk all the tequila and passed out and was asleep. So all the grandchildren, whip out their cell phones and took a picture of it, and Miss Flora slept through the whole thing. They put the bottle of tequila back on the bar, and Miss Flora was none the wiser until her daughter, that I called Dee Dee for dutiful daughter, was making the garden club yearbook. She always did a beautiful garden club yearbook, had the picture of a flower on the front and who was going to have the program and everybody's address and contact info. And so she she did that, and she took that picture and she made one garden club yearbook with that picture on the front, and then the rest of them were like normal with the flowers on top. So, and she put that one on top of the box and mailed the box off to Miss Flora. And I can only imagine Miss Flora's panic when she opened that box and sees this picture she's never seen of her with the bottle of tequila looking like she's passed out. But she must have thought it was pretty funny because she took it to her garden club meeting, and after she passed all the yearbooks around, she passed that one copy around, and they all got a good laugh about it. But those are the kind of stories. And then I paired that in the book with a tequila shrimp that you cook on the grill. That is a really good story. So sometimes the stories relate directly to the recipe, and sometimes they're just a good story. Valerie Byerline, who's a good friend of mine, who just wrote the book The Devil at His Elbow, said that her editor told her sometimes a good story is just a good story. So sometimes you just need those good stories and find the recipe and the recipe box that may pair with it, whether it's really that person's recipe or not. But and all stories don't necessarily have to be funny. Um, I, my grandmother, who, Abraham Lincoln said everything he is today he owed to his mother. Well, probably 85% of what I am today is I owe to my grandmother, because she was such a huge influence on my life. But it was funny to us at the time, but it kind of has a sweet ending to it. After my grandmother and aunts moved down here into this house in Beaufort, we had a yard man. And he would come and help my grandmother in the yard. And he must have had the patience of Job, because he would, dig a little trench for her, and then she would go behind him and drop the gladiola seeds, or the gladiola bulbs, or the um, snapdragon seeds, and then he'd go behind her and cover them up. but he lived out in the country. And his gift every year for my grandmother was he would go cut her a Christmas tree. And after a while, he started coming on the during the week because he had retired. He worked with my Aunt Mary at Paris Island, and after he retired, he could come during the week. So one year he had cut the Christmas tree down for my Aunt Mary, for my grandmother, and brought it to her during the week. And you remember those old-fashioned Christmas tree stands, the red ones with the kind of fluted bowl that you put the water in, and then it had the three legs that came out. Well, they had one of those. And so Earl and my grandmother were going to put the tree up. Well, Earl had overestimated, this house has 9.5 foot ceilings, but he had overestimated the height of them a little bit. And the tree was a little bit too big. So they had to start, sawing part of the bottom of the tree off. And then they had to saw some of the branches off to try to get it to fit. And the tree, for most people, a Christmas tree is a perfect triangular shape like this. Well, once they started sawing the branches off, it took more like a column shape like this. Well, then they started sticking the branches back in the tree holder. Well, then it started looking more like an upside down Christmas tree like this. Or think of a water fountain that starts out really small down here and just, goes up and then flows back down like that. So it sort of looked like an upside down Christmas tree. And my grandmother didn't want to hurt his feelings, so they started putting the lights on it. And then they kind of tried to figure out where the star should go, but wasn't really a point. So they just put the star to the side. And my grandmother made these beautiful, you remember the red satin balls? And she would save her jewelry all during the year if she broke a piece of it. Excuse me. And so she'd make these beautifully decorated red satin balls with her jewelry on it. And they put all those on them. And, Earl was kind of pretty proud of their work, and he left for the day. And my Aunt Mimi, who was my mother's youngest sister, would have come in first. And Mimi could look at something and put her hand up the side of her face and give it a like, well, that's interesting look. Like, I don't quite know. There's something wrong about it. I don't quite know what it is, but that's interesting. And then she had this little smile she'd give you, this little kind of like, that's interesting. And I'm sure she went on in the kitchen and started cooking dinner. And then my Aunt Mary, who was the oldest and typical, oldest kind of everything had to be perfect child, I'm sure she came in and probably tried to give it a little adjustment. And every time somebody looked at that tree, my grandma would look at them, and with that, that grandmama finger, she would go, that is the tree Earl brought me. Earl is my friend. That is the tree we're using. And that night, my brother and I, we used to later lived right next door, but at the time we lived right around the corner. And my mother brought my brother and I around here that night to see the tree. And my brother was, I started to say somewhat of a perfectionist. He was not somewhat of a perfectionist. He was a diehard perfectionist. And he looked at the tree. He was probably about 12 at the time, and burst out in tears and was like, Grandma, please let us go to the Piggly Wiggly or go to the tree farm and we buy you a tree. And please let us buy you a tree. And my grandmother said, that is the tree Earl brought me. Earl is my friend. That is the tree we're using. And I tell that story because, I don't remember what gifts I got under that tree that year. But all these years later, I remember that lesson that my grandmother taught me, that is the tree Earl brought me. Earl is my friend. That is the tree we're using. And, I think those stories are equally as important as some of it. That story's a little bit funny because of George having a little not temper tantrum, but he just didn't like his beautiful grandmother that we all adored and revered, not having just the perfect Christmas tree. But to her, it was perfect because her friend had brought it. And, so just little stories like that. And, I think that the kind of stories like that have a great lesson to them. I meant to ask you at the beginning of this, but I was so worried about my voice. What I would like for y'all to do for just a minute, and you can, if you got a scratch pad or whatever, I hope I've kind of inspired y'all a little bit to think about either a really good food memory that you've got or a really good family memory that you've got. And I hope you'll just take a few minutes after we finish this to get a notepad out and write some of those down and think about what stories of your family that you want to start thinking about and writing down and preserving, what recipes you want to think about and start preserving. A couple of caveats on recipes. I mentioned my mom was a home ec major. Most of my mom's recipes were about that long. She'd be pretty good about having the ingredients, but she just sort of assumed in her recipes a level of cooking that probably a 1950s home ec major had that uh, certainly my godchildren would not have. So I tried to do the recipes in the book that were longer and had more instructions to them, so anybody could pick them up and go through step by step and know how to do those. Um, and the other thing I would say is, it's very charming to say, well, my grandmother made her biscuits and she just got a handful of flour. Well, my hands are much, much bigger than my grandmother's. So uh, a handful of flour from my hand and a handful of my grandmother's biscuit flour, you would probably end up with some very floury, not very high rising biscuits. So please, if I could pull out the drawer, other than my knee is sitting right up against it, I would pull out a measuring cup and the measuring spoons and say, please get those out. Measure, if you think it's a cup, do that. If you need to add a little more, get the fourth of a cup out and just sort of estimate till you keep getting it about the right amount. Get the measuring spoons out. And if you think it's a teaspoon and then you need to add more, add a fourth of a teaspoon more at a time to try to get those measurements down. Write down the steps to it. My Aunt Mimi was famous for her cheese biscuits, and she'd give anybody the recipe, but she did all these little things that, she just came naturally to her. And it wasn't that she didn't want you to be able to make her cheese biscuits. It was just so natural to her. She didn't think it was a step or a part of the process. So when I was trying to get her cheese biscuit recipe down pat, I wrote what I thought was the recipe, and then I had a friend come sit in the kitchen and watch me make them, and she was like, "No, no, no, you left that step out." So we think we finally got the recipe down pretty pat, and several friends that have tried to make them or say they pretty much turn out the way Mimi's did. I'll be happy to take questions in a minute. I do have a poem. My grandmother was real big on, I mentioned she taught school and she made George and I write poems and memorize poems when we were growing up. And she would be very disappointed in me that I have not completely memorized this poem yet. But a friend of mine sent this to me at Thanksgiving last year. It's called Grace, Grace. It's by Jake Adam York. If you want to read the whole thing, it's on my website, which is the cheesebiscuitqueen.com. Just go in there under stories. And the whole poem is there. If you're at the website, if you're having an Easter ham, the champagne mustard that I love to make is in there, and the recipes on my website under recipes. I think there might even be a picture of that long ago lovely Christmas tree. You'll know the one it is because it goes out in all directions. Some of parts of it almost look like Martian antlers going off, but I'd like to share this poem with y'all, and then I'll be glad to open it up for questions. So these are the last few stanzas of it. Again, it's called Grace by Jake Adam York. It says, sometimes I say the recipe to the air, and sometimes I say his name or her name, and sometimes I just set the table because meals are memorials that teach us how to move. History moves in us as we raise our voices and then our glasses to pour a little out for those who poured everything out for us. We pour ourselves for them so they can eat again. And I love that. You read something, you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd written that first. And I just think that's so beautiful. But I hope that inspires you. I hope it'll inspire you to go read the whole thing. I think it's a beautiful poem. And I'll be happy to take any questions, tell some more stories. I got to speak at my grandmother's church tomorrow night down here, the Methodist church. And when the minister asked me through a friend, a high school friend, and I'm like, has the minister read all the stories in that book? But I've got enough ones of my grandmother I'm going to tell. So y'all say a little prayer for me tomorrow night about 6 o'clock at the Carteret Street Methodist Church in Beaufort, that I just stick to the grandmommy stories and don't stray too far. But McCabe, if you'd said speak about 30 minutes, I'm at 29. So if you want to pop back in here, I'll be glad to answer any questions. I saw a few people had comments as we were going through.
Yes, we have had some comments, and also I believe that I can share your PowerPoint if you would like me
Okay.
to. And there we go. I'm popped back in. So I will
I tell you,
pull up.
if you can just scan through the PowerPoint, maybe I can narrate it. And I apologize for sounding like Kermit the Frog, but
Not at all. All right, let me share my screen,
now that y'all have heard all the stories, we can just flip through this real quick. So,
and we'll do from the beginning.
well, there's obviously the cookbook. That's the new cookbook cover. Okay, you can hit the next one. This is that's the quote I started with from Pat, but the window is actually at M. Judson Books in Greenville. I was there the other week and saw that quote, and um, the first signing that they had at M. Judson was Pat Conroy, so they immortalized him with that window in their front. Okay, that's my grandmother, and that's George and me and Sissy, and you can see why my mother would and father would not have wanted to drag that entire entourage in every time they had to go to a grocery store. So that's why we pretty much ended up sitting in the car. Okay. Well, I didn't tell this story, but one of the most fun things I've gotten to do while I have, since writing a cookbook, was about a year and a half ago, I got to interview Jacques Pepin at the Amelia Island Celebrity Author Luncheon. And let me assure you, I was not the celebrity author. I sold about 10 tickets and he sold the other 200. But it was right around Veterans Day. And I wanted to do something to honor the veterans that were in the room. And Jacques is a veteran of the French Navy, and his father had been in the French resistance during World War II. And my father had landed on D-Day in a glider, so I wanted to do something to honor him. And I told a long story about Jacques and right after well, at the end of World War II, he and his brother were chasing after an American tank. This is the short version of it. And the Americans were throwing gum, and he and his brother, he's the middle of three boys, and he was about 10 at the time. And he and his brother caught a pack of gum and they would share it. Not like his brother got a stick and he got a stick, like his brother chewed it a little bit, and then Jacques chewed it a little
Oh
bit, and then his brother
no.
chewed it some more. And and Jacques said he also caught a candy bar, which the Americans, of course, were throwing from the tanks. And Jacques said it was the first time I remember tasting milk chocolate. And so in that little envelope that you can see on the table, I had a pack of gum and a Hershey candy bar. And when I reached over and I'd given him the gum and said, "You don't have to share this with anybody." And then when I reached over and gave him the Hershey candy bar, he kissed my hand. So that's one of the favorite things I've done since have been writing cookbooks. So that's me and Jacques and Amelia Island. And that's a story I didn't tell. You can, that was, y'all have to get the book and read about, that's from Mayweather Middleton Manigault when somebody made a faux pas at one of my cousin's rehearsal, bridesmaids luncheons. And 50 years later, we were still talking about it. But y'all have to get the book to get that one. That's me being a lobbyist. You can skip past that. That was to talk about when my goddaughter was leaving on her semester abroad. And it hurt me to put that tiger paw up there, but I did. That's my mom's recipe box. You can see the red top and the white bottom, and those were a lot of the family recipes I went through to that are in the cookbook. And Lord knows I've probably got enough for 3 or 4 more. Y'all can see my family like to write recipes and clip recipes. So you can hit the next one. That went with the Miss Flora bottle of tequila story. Those are the if you look over on the left hand side, the little yellow pointy cups, those were what the salads that looked like another something else were formed in. Uh, that's my daddy, the Garanimals story. That was daddy in the war and when he was a lawyer, and then the little 4-year-old Garanimals, that's a hippopotamus. So you would wear all the hippopotamuses together, but you wouldn't wear a hippopotamus with a giraffe. So you can hit the next one. Oh, here it is. Here it is. This is the famous Christmas tree. See how it all sort of how it all sort of goes out in different directions. And it was all much smaller on the bottom. And just so y'all have a frame of reference, that's Aunt Mimi, my mother's younger sister, on the left. Her real name is Martha. I'm Mary Martha, named after both of them. Obviously, that's my grandmother in the middle and my Aunt Mary on the right. But that was them. I wish we had a picture of the Christmas tree in its own glory, but it'd give y'all enough of an idea. And the other thing I wanted to say about this picture, not only did it remind me of a funny story and a sweet thing about my grandmother, but I hadn't thought about this story in years. And when I was looking for some other pictures here at the house, I found that picture, and it reminded me of that story. So sometimes if you go through your old photo albums, that might be a little helpful, jog your memory to think of some other family stories that you need to write down. So you can hit the next one. And I didn't close with this, but this was another one of Pat's famous quotes of a recipe is a story that ends in a good meal. And again, I'll cordially invite y'all to come down to the Pat Conroy Center because it really is a jewel. They have we just had March 4th, which is a celebration of when Pat passed away. And he's been dead 9 years, as hard as that is to believe. And then in the fall, usually around the 1st of November, last weekend in October, they have the big Pat Conroy Festival. And I would invite all of y'all down to, I would be, and I think, McCabe, you can help me with this. The Conroy Center is a something, something literary site. What program is that y'all have, or is that not under your purview?
It is, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I was about to mention
Because I
it.
was so eloquent, the something, something literary site.
I knew exactly what you meant.
Okay.
The South Carolina Literary Landmarks, and we had taken a hiatus, and we're bringing them back as totally a state library function. And so we've actually just created a new nomination form because we're opening it up to the South Carolinians. And I have the link, I'll post it in the chat. But basically, any location that has significant tie to an author, a novel, perhaps a famous editor, something like that that spent a significant amount of time in South Carolina. We invite you to nominate those, and then we'll present them to our board and then go from there. And eventually, we're going to have an interactive map of all these areas in case you want to
Fabulous.
take a drive. But I have followed and do follow the Pat Conroy Literary Center, and they just do such amazing work. And it is one of our current 5 literary landmarks. And that his name alone is recognized everywhere around the United States, and so it's really an honor that this was his home and to have that as a literary landmark.
Marley Rusoff, who was Pat's agent, is a dear friend. And a couple of years ago, we'd actually started trying to compile a list of those things. So I'll be glad to send you probably more than you would want when we get through with this call. So you can flip to the next one, and it might just be oh, well, this was going to be my question. This is always my question slide. And I always say questions other than my mother so wanted a prissy little dainty girl, and I so was not. That's me, third from the right. But this was the Little Miss Beaufort pageant in
Oh,
1964.
cute.
And some of my dearest friends are in that picture, and we've stayed friends all these years. But what my mother was thinking, I do not know. But if anybody's got any questions other than what my mother was thinking, I would be happy to answer those. And if you do come to Beaufort and you come to the Pat Conroy Festival, that stage was the old USC Beaufort stage. It was Beaufort Elementary back then, but you would get to see that stage if you will come join us at the Pat Conroy Festival. So I'll give another plug for it. You got any questions for me, McCabe?
I certainly do have some questions, and then we also open up basically anybody in any of the participants. If you want to unmute and ask a question, you certainly may, or you can type it in a chat, and I can read it out for you. One question that I have, it's kind of a comment question thing, but at the state library, one of our themes that we do monthly in December is food, and looking at the recipes that people have preserved. You can learn so much from them, like times of war, what was substituted instead when there was rations. And you can also see a lot of women's work in there when sometimes maybe they wouldn't have been written about or their work might not have been evident, but you will find them in recipe books. And it brings along such a sense of community, and I really appreciate that. And I loved how you talked about getting the measuring cups and the spoons out, because that is, oh, you just throw this in or
Yeah.
throw that in. And I know sometimes when I'm working on a recipe, I'm like, oh, I'll write it down later. I'll write it down later. And I never remember. And that is such an important part. It's kind of like people say, oh, too many people are taking pictures and not enjoying the moment. But you do need to document that. So I thought that was a great point. Um, do we have
Yes.
any? I'm sorry, go
My
ahead.
my brother's partner, my brother was gay, and he and his partner were together for many, many years. My brother's been gone for a while, but his partner made the best ribs and the best thick cut pork chops with a bourbon applesauce. And I kept wanting those recipes for the book. And so I finally threatened if he didn't come over and help, let's recreate those recipes, that I was going to make some up and just say they were his. Well, of course, no, that wouldn't do. So he finally came over and we did, but trying to get, he would just sprinkle, we'll just get the garlic powder and just sprinkle till it looks right. And I'm like, no, we cannot do that. And we had not a knockdown drag out. We had a really good time cooking that night, but he passed away right when this book was going to press. And so it was kind of a big reminder again, to get those recipes down while people are still here and can give you the directions to do it. So very important. Measure,
Absolutely.
measure, 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 and
It is.
instruct.
I've sort of become the keeper of the recipes for my grandmother, Mimi. She just passed away in January. And, you know, I, we were inseparable like this, since I was a kid. And that's where I kind of learned to cook and also overeat everything on my plate. It's
Eating with
horrible.
love. The more you ate, the more you loved them.
I, I know, but then at a certain age, they're like, well, maybe
Yeah.
don't eat all that. I said, well, putting it on my plate. But so I love seeing the recipes in her handwriting and even the little spills and this and that, and the actual physical paper recipes, but
Yeah.
also taking those and then digitizing them for later, and so everyone can have that. And I've heard of people like creating Google Docs or a folder that they can share with families and adding to that. Such great memories. I became the keeper of the tomato soup aspic recipe for Mimi, and it has many of my least favorite things in there: gelatin, tomato soup. I forget, maybe
A
a couple of.
cream cheese and mayonnaise. That might be the one that's in the book.
It has shrimp in it and
That-
celery.
Yep, yep.
She never could find the recipe. So she was always calling me, and I would Google, and she'd say, oh, no, 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 it's not that one. So finally I found a picture of it. And that one was like, yes, this is the correct one, and saved it. I'm just not a tomato fan. So I just was like, but I don't know. I just loved it every time she would call me and ask for that, and how it would remind her of things. And sometimes when we were in the kitchen, an ingredient or this and that would spark a memory in her, and how precious and what a treasure that is.
Well, and the best recipes are the ones that have the most stains on them. I mean, that's how, when you start going through the recipe box, just set those aside first, and those are the really good ones because they've got the most vanilla or tomato soup or whatever
Mhm.
stains are on
Absolutely.
them.
Let's see. Look, we have a comment from Barbara. My kids have requested the recipe for prison food, which is the dish we made to take to the homeless shelter. We tested it at home and the kids loved it.
Oh.
That is really neat. So, what is in prison food, Barbara? Should give her a moment to do that. I did post in the chat. The registration is open for the December visit, where Mary Martha will be in person at the state library discussing making holiday food gifts. And I believe there will be a demonstration as
I think
well.
we're probably going to make champagne mustard, and if
Ooh,
your custodian will let me, we might even make some white chocolate popcorn if it doesn't make too much of a big mess.
we may be able to do that. They don't come till later in the day. Barbara says lentils and noodles, onion and garlic.
That sounds
Okay.
good.
Very hearty and probably very tasty. Do we have any other questions at this time? Okay.
Um, if you want a copy of the book, you can go to my website. It's on Amazon. It's at uscpress.com. Please support your local independent booksellers. They probably have them, especially if it's in South Carolina, or they can order them for you. And McCabe, I just want to thank you for having me. And please come hear me sometime when I don't sound like Kermit the Frog.
Absolutely. This has been a pleasure. And I will also put in the chat, I have the links for the event survey, feedback survey, and the nomination form for the South Carolina Literary Landmarks.
Okay.
And really excited about bringing that back because we really do have just such a rich literary heritage here in South Carolina, including you. And it's a great thing, and I love to celebrate it.
I do too.
Well, thank you again, Mary Martha, the Cheese Biscuit Queen, and thank you everyone that came this evening. We hope to see you all in person in December. And good luck with the rest of your book tour, and may there be so many sales you run out of copies.
Thank you. Thank you. As my friend, my Irish friend would say, from your lips to God's ears.
Love it. Well, have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, y'all.